I'm Susie Landolfi, and welcome to Be Crazy Well. Now, why would a therapist say that? Because we all have mental health struggles, even therapists. The good news is we have so much more information about how we can be crazy well. On my podcast, we don't focus on what's wrong with us. We want to know what happened to us. We're going to explore how trauma affected us, both negatively and positively. That's right. I said positively. It's called post-traumatic growth, and it's a real thing. Be Crazy Well will share mental health wellness practices, the newest mental health research, and most importantly, how we all get to create the person we deserve to be and the life we deserve to live. So join the mental health evolution and be crazy well. Hi, and welcome to Be Crazy Well. And I've been asked this a lot, so I thought I'd talk about it today and share with you. We use words a lot. We use shortcuts. We use definitions of things that we don't get to define. In other words, we learn how to speak. We learn about meaning of words from other people. And so their definition is what we believe is true. And I was thinking about what happens when I'm sitting in a huddle at MVP, which is for Merging Vets and Players. And I'm hearing the combat veterans and the retired professional athletes talk about how they feel. And oftentimes when they talk about someone that they lost in a battle or to suicide, or when they lost their purpose again, or the first time or again, and they lost their team, and they oftentimes talk about guilt. And I thought, I need to look up the definition. Just because if we're going to talk about survivor's guilt, we should think about what that means. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to read to you a definition of guilt that I just got on Google. The fact of having committed a specified or implied offense or crime. The fact of having committed a specified offense or crime. So oftentimes when I hear their story about the situation of the person that they lost, it's interesting that I never hear a fact about an offense. It's not like I hear them say, I did this and that's why they died, or I didn't do this and that's why they died. Now, sometimes I hear that, but when you talk about a fact versus a feeling, I would say that most feelings aren't facts, and a lot of facts aren't true. So when you go deeper into the situation, more times than not, I found out there was absolutely nothing they could do to save their brother or sister. And this is true whether it's downrange in a battlefield or suicide. And I was thinking again about, is this what they're feeling? If the situation, that's what it says, a situation, if an offense or crime wasn't committed, then maybe we're using the wrong words. So then I looked up grief. And here's the definition of grief. Deep sorrow, especially that is caused by someone's death. Deep sorrow, especially caused by someone's death. And I was thinking, wait a minute, what if we are messing up here by talking about survivor's guilt when we should be talking about survivor's grief? And why would we use guilt and not grief? Clearly the definition of what's happening to all of us, my brother, committed suicide. My mother did as well. So what is it that made us go immediately to survivor's guilt and not survivor's grief? And I realized from my upbringing, I learned definitions of words. I learned how to think about myself and feel about myself by who was talking to me and taking care of me, whether it was my mom or dad, siblings, whether I was in school. And I realized that one of the things that would happen is if I was yelled at, I believed I did something wrong, that I committed an offense. And if my dad got upset about something and yelled at me as a small child, I believed I did something wrong. I believe I committed an offense. And sometimes he was so angry, I must have committed a crime. And then I would be punished. I also remember that when I felt sad or grief over the loss of a pet or a person, I wasn't really encouraged to continue that process. Oftentimes, if I was sad about a loss of anything as a child, I was told to stop crying. And I'm thinking, wow, we've been trained to assume that we're guilty. And we are trained not to honor and fulfill our right to grief. So this was sort of an aha moment for me. I have lost my father, mother, sister, brother. There's only 5 of us in the family. I'm the only one still here. And I know this sounds weird and probably not even, true, and it is. All of them died at 56. Actually, my brother made it to 57. And I remember feeling guilty that I was still here. I remember feeling guilty that I should have done more. Now, these 56 years old, you're an adult. My sister died in a car crash, so obviously there wasn't anything I could do about that. And I always felt, though, I could have, been a better sister. And I did a lot for my mom, who ultimately died of taking her cancer medication because her prognosis for death was horrific. And she made that decision, and that was her right. And my brother died from an accidental overdose because he was using drugs. Now, I say accidental. I got to be honest. I'm sure he was ambivalent about living. And we don't talk enough about that either. People that kind of want to live and kind of don't. So then I looked up another word. And I looked up the word regret. So let me get that word here. There we go. Where is it? Boy, I'm the wrong person to be doing. There we go. All right. I'm so not digitally okay. All right, regret. Feel sad, repentant, or disappointed over something that has happened or been done, especially a lost, this is the most important part, missed opportunity. Now, the only thing I would change about this says, feel sad, repentant, or disappointed over something that has happened or been done. How about feeling sad or repentant over something you didn't do? So I have more regrets about what I didn't do, as opposed to maybe a lot of the things I did do. And then it says a loss or missed opportunity. And I was thinking, what if we trained ourselves and practice talking more about our grief and our regret? I was thinking that guilt shames us sometimes to the point of inaction. Guilt can push us to ambivalence about living. we can truly walk around believing that we did something wrong, we committed an offense that we didn't. Talk about regret. Talk about being trained to believe that you are guilty when you had absolutely no ability to change the outcome. And worse, walking around with unprocessed grief and the missed opportunity to be able to express it and then do something about it. To literally be able to move through your grief and use that feeling of loss and sadness to change how you actually behave, that you make different decisions and therefore have less regret. Grief can help us make decisions and live a life that will lessen our regret. Now, I'm all for that, because trust me, I've got enough mistakes, missed opportunities, and things I haven't done. I got enough. Let's just put it that way. So I'm not interested in adding to that. I'd like to be able to make decisions that I know will make me the person I deserve to be and create the life I deserve to live, and have the relationships, the connections that I truly want. Because I know one thing, and we've researched this over and over, connection is everything. And I mean everything. And it really is the fire for us to live. It's really one of the most important aspects of being human that will lessen our ambivalence of living. So what if we started talking about survivor's responsibility? Now, I don't know about you, I had to be a very responsible child because everybody else was truly screwing up from their own trauma. I get it. No judgment here, just a fact that we all had a lot of trauma in my family. And it wasn't even a choice. I was just the second born child that said, okay, one more person having a lot of crises and not doing what they're supposed to do is going to make this whole family fall apart. So I look back now as a superpower from my trauma, post-traumatic growth. Then I got to say, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to show up. Now, the trouble is that was all built on top of unprocessed, unwitnessed, uncared for grief. Grief about the missed opportunities and missed people and missed joy in my life. And when I started my own healing process, I realized that one of the things I was going to do is I was going to grieve. And I'll show you how it started. So I kept moving on and just doing more, being a human doing, and I wouldn't take a look at the 5 members of my family that had died at 56, one at 57. And finally, I got smart enough to go to a therapist. You know, it sounds weird. Well, this is before I was a therapist. And my family didn't use therapy. Oftentimes, many families, for generations, don't go and talk to someone and can't even ask for help. So I'm sitting in this therapist's office, and she's a lovely lady, a nice gray-haired lady, old lady like me now. And I start to tell her what happened to me as a child, like sort of what went through. And being the sort of OCD type of person that I am, I want to get it in order. You know, I'm the person that cleans the house before the person comes and helps me clean. So I get it sort of all in order, and I'm completely disassociated from the grief and horror of what I'm going to tell her, because I just want to get it right. So I start listing all of this horrific trauma, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, poverty, drug and alcohol addiction. I mean, just unbelievable things, even incest. And I start listing it. And you know, when you're thinking about something and you're looking over here and you're looking over there and you're looking down here, finally I look at this woman's face, and this is what I see. I see horror. I see her with her hand over her mouth and tears in her eyes. And I was so confused. I was so confused that I pulled one of the dog things, like, did something happen behind me that made her feel so horror-stricken? And there's a wall behind me. And then all of a sudden I realized that she was grieving for me, that she heard and witnessed for me the horror of what I had experienced. And in that moment, my eyes welled up, and I finally got back the feelings of grief. And I was so grateful and yet so scared. And I had stopped crying and grieving at about 10 because things weren't going to change. So grieving and being sad, it wasn't going to get fixed. I just had to keep moving and keep doing and keep overachieving. So at that moment, those tears started to flow, and they didn't stop for a whole year. And I cried at 3 Al-Anon meetings a day, morning, lunch, and evening. And Al-Anon is a 12-step program for people who grew up in families with substance use or any kind of addiction, even rage, because rage actually creates the same effects in children that living with a parent that's struggling with addiction. So I went to 3 Al-Anon meetings a day. I went to Buddhist meditation classes every day. Went to the center and learned how to meditate. And I went to Billy Blank's Taebo kickboxing almost every day, standing next to Magic Johnson. And I'm so grateful for my hair. People comment a lot about my hair. It comes from my dad and my mom. And because I was crying all the time, this is how I walked around most of the time, because I didn't want people to see that I was crying. And I realized that I became in awe of and a devoted, committed person to grief. That I was never going to hide that again. I was never not going to honor it. I was never going to disregard it and take on guilt. Because trust me, for years, I felt guilty about every mistake I made, every missed opportunity, everything I didn't do. No matter how good I did in something, all I felt were the words of my dad, which is, "You're not good enough." So I had a lot of changing to do about guilt and grief. The nice thing now is when I mess up, I honor the guilt. Now, I don't necessarily let it bring me to my knees, because that's not going to help me fix it. And as my daughter likes to say, don't apologize. Say you were wrong. Just say, look, I was wrong. What I just did, what I didn't do was wrong. And how can I make this better? What can I do? And that, to me, helps that guilt move through me quickly into action, into being different. And when I talk about survivor's responsibility, you know, one of the things that I decided to do because my family couldn't do this, they were so traumatized that they were incapable of really doing the health work and the mental health and physical health work that would have had them, other than my sister, live beyond 56 years old. My mom couldn't stop smoking, so she died of throat cancer. She died of the medication that she took for throat cancer. My dad died from an aneurysm and a whole bunch of health issues at 56 because he couldn't stop drinking, he couldn't stop eating, raging, and everything else. My brother, bless his heart, very successful for 25 years, and once he retired, his depression came back so great, and he could not accept the help and the change. And only my sister was the one that made great changes in her life and then died at someone else's struggle. A drugged driver hit her and killed her instantly. So now I have the ability to grieve. I have the ability still to feel guilty and do something about it. I'm not just going to sit in guilt. That is going to be my call to action. And I have less regret because I have accepted survivor's responsibility. So I have a responsibility to stop the multi-generational transmission of trauma in my family. Let's say that again. Multi-generational, many generations, transmission, giving, passing on of trauma. So I do my wellness practices, physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and financial. All of that. Those are my daily wellness practices. And if you lost someone in the military, either from suicide or from a battle, wouldn't survivor's responsibility be a call to action to check on those families that lost your brother or sister, that lost that veteran, that military person? Wouldn't it be better if instead of walking around feeling like somehow it was your responsibility to make sure everybody was safe? What if you did the best you could, that you possibly could, at keeping your brothers and sisters safe? I remember when my grandson got leukemia. Now, before he got leukemia, he got it twice. I like to joke and say because he came from a family of overachievers, therefore you do everything better twice. And I remember before he got leukemia, like when he was really tiny, I'm talking a year, 2 years, 3 years old. He got it when he was 5 3/4. I would say, Logan, my job is to keep you safe. Therefore, this is what we're going to. You're going to hold my hand when we cross the street. We're not going to put a lot of sugar on our food. We're going to eat some vegetables. Like, I just kept using safety as one of the responsibilities that I had as a grandparent. So my job is to keep you safe. And I would make him repeat it to me. And I'd say, what's my job? He'd go, Gima, your job is to keep me safe. That's right. And then as life would have it, I got a great punch in the face and he got leukemia. And I realized it was nobody's fault. Like, it was nobody's fault. And sorry, just sneezed. I know everybody says, why don't you make noise when you sneeze? I don't know. I just sneeze that way. Anyway, so I realized I didn't have the power to always keep him safe. I didn't. No one does. So I went back to this little child who's now in the hospital, bald and tubes everywhere. And I said, Logan, I've got to change what I told you because I can't do what I used to tell you. What I used to tell you. Jim, you told me that your job was to keep me safe. And I said, you're right. That's what I told you, but I was wrong. And I'm going to fix it. So this is my job. My job, like every other parent in this family, or adult in this family, our job is to teach you how to help keep yourself safe. That's our job. Our job is to help others, those we love, younger and older, whoever is open. Our job is to help each other really learn how to keep ourselves safe. Guilt won't do that. Grief will do that. And using guilt and regret to move through it in order as a call to action and change, that'll do it. So it's really powerful for me to be able to say, when you go to that birthday party, Logan, and you can't eat sugar right now because sugar helps cancer grow, I want you to do your best not to eat that cake and ice cream, and it's going to be so hard. I know it's going to be hard. And I promise you, when you get home, we'll eat cantaloupe. He loved cantaloupe. It was my saving grace. And that's what we're supposed to do, is to help one another, keep each other safe, help each other grieve. We can own our mistakes and then have survivor's responsibility every day. That's what we get. That's one of the gifts of being human. So I want to thank you all for joining me on Be Crazy Well. It's funny, even when I came up with that name, I was thinking, I don't want to even feel guilty about being a little bit crazy. I want to do it well. So any way you look at it, that's a win. Like, keep moving through. I'll leave you with one little bit of information that a native friend of mine gave to me. And we were talking about the prairie, and he said, Buffalo was all over the United States for many, many, many thousands and thousands of years. And when cattle were brought, obviously, I won't go into the whole idea of what happened, but cattle took over. Let's just put it that way so we don't get into a long discussion on that. So cattle were allowed to take over, and the buffalo were slaughtered. Okay. And what wasn't understood was how cattle respond to a storm and respond to danger. So what happened is, when a storm is coming through the prairie, and I've spent many wonderful days in South Dakota, Pine Ridge, and many of the other reservations around the Midwest, and the cattle would see this storm coming and they'd start to run. So as the storm is coming on them, they're running away from the storm. Unfortunately, the storm's going to catch up with them. And as life would have it, they would oftentimes move at the same pace, or roughly a similar pace, of the storm. And they would be in that storm for hours and hours. And many of them would freeze to death and die. Buffalo, on the other hand, see a storm coming. As it starts to move towards them, they turn around and face that storm. As cold as it is, with the wind blowing and the ice and the snow, they face it and they run towards it. And you've probably seen some iconic pictures of buffalo just covered in snow and ice, and they run towards it and they move through it. So you have the storm moving over them as they're running through it onto the other side. So they actually aren't in the storm as long, because they're willing to face it and use it as a motivation to survive. So I'll just leave you with that wonderful natural message. We learn so much from the natural world. I'm so grateful. So face your storm, and know this: you can always be your best self. Oh, funny, that's the title of the theme song, written by Calvin Love. Check him out on Spotify and all the other music stations. And until next time, be crazy well. No regrets.
Love.